You know how to hurt somebody without leaving marks?
Pretty much. I know how to do a lot of things to people, but like I said, why would I be out there to do something stupid like to kill her?
In the quiet suburb of Jamen, Idaho, no one expected that a peaceful home on Ross Avenue would become the center of a chilling murder investigation. But everything changed one summer afternoon when the silence was broken by the horrifying discovery of a decomposed body inside 68-year-old Lisa Anstuki's home. What started as a welfare check soon unraveled into one of the most bizarre and twisted cases the town had ever seen. Lisa was known for being careful, private, and extremely security conscious. So when her close friend, Doran Spears, hadn't heard from her in nearly 2 weeks, she knew something was off. Concerned, she stopped by Lisa's house to check in. As she stepped into the garage, she noticed the door to the house was strangely unlocked, completely unlike Lisa, who always kept things tightly secured. The moment she entered, a foul smell overwhelmed her, halting her in her tracks. Terrified of what might be inside, she called the authorities.
911, where's your emergency? Okay, my emergency is that, oh my gosh, we looked in the house and there's a break-in. It smells like somebody's dead in the house.
When detectives arrived at the scene, they quickly realized this was no ordinary welfare check. The door to the backyard had been kicked in and the stench inside the house was overpowering. As they made their way to the master bedroom, the odor became unbearable. There, lying on a pile of clothing, was a body so decomposed it was almost unrecognizable.
As I walked in, it was clear that the back door that led to the backyard had been kicked in, and that was the first sign that really something was wrong here.
But since Lisa lived alone, it was presumed to be her. The investigation started with more questions than answers. The house showed signs of possible robbery, but there was no clear evidence of forced entry at the front. The body had a shirt covering the head, and when detectives removed it, they discovered a severe skull fracture. This wasn't an accident or natural death. Lisa had been murdered.
Just outside the master bedroom, I noticed a ball-peen hammer. Knowing that she had sustained blunt force trauma to the back of her head, that hammer was the first thing that we looked at as a potential weapon in this homicide. There were quite a few fingerprints that were taken from the scene. We tried to grab any that we could find that might lead us to who the suspect was. There's also a phone that was found under a pillow on the master bed.
Nearby, they found a hammer lying outside the bedroom. Given the blunt force injury, it became their first suspect weapon. They collected fingerprints and seized a phone found under a pillow, hoping digital clues could lead them to the killer. But the case was far from straightforward. As detectives examined the scene, a man casually approached the house. His behavior was odd. He asked about the crime before anyone had spoken publicly about it. He introduced himself as Mario, a nearby resident who claimed to use Lisa's yard as a shortcut to work. But as detectives spoke to him further, they learned he wasn't just a random passerby.
He was dressed a little differently, had some headphones on, and this male walked by and said to one of our deputies, "What happened? Somebody get murdered here?" And they thought that was very odd.
Mario was staying with the Lively family, longtime friends and former caretakers of Lisa. After losing her husband, Lisa had moved to Idaho from California and formed a close bond with the Livelies. They had supported her during a difficult transition and became like a second family. But now, with Lisa gone and a tangled web of connections forming, the once trusted relationships around her started to look darker. What seemed like a random act of violence soon pointed to a much more personal betrayal, one that no one, not even Lisa's closest friends, could have predicted.
I feel that the Livelies were looking out for Lisa, and the fact that she was a widow, they just felt like they needed to bring her under their wing and keep her safe.
Lisa had grown especially close to the Lively family after moving to Idaho. She saw Wendy Lively as a best friend. They spent weekends together, went to garage sales, and shared daily routines. Wendy's son, Jamen, even mowed Lisa's lawn. To those around her, it looked like the Liveleys had taken Lisa in as one of their own, especially since she was a recent widow. Wendy's daughter Adonna had a live-in boyfriend, Mario. He was expected to treat Lisa with the same kindness. But when detectives looked into Mario's past, they discovered a troubling history: break-ins, robbery, and violent crimes. That raised suspicion, especially when he casually approached the crime scene and made a strange comment about someone being murdered. It wasn't something a bystander would normally say, and investigators took note.
Mario, how come you said it looks like somebody got murdered?
I didn't say that.
No, you said, hey, what happened? Did somebody get hurt?
Okay, yeah, I brought that up because, hey, you don't see this every single time where it's all forensic stuff and stuff like that. I put 2 and 2 together. I'm not stupid.
But to walk by and say that, you threw so much suspicion right on yourself. You know
That's
that?
fine. That's totally fine. I don't know.
You have the mystery.
I've straightened out my life.
As they dug deeper, a possible motive emerged. Mario had recently been accused of stealing from Wendy. He admitted things had become tense and that he'd lashed out in anger, threatening the family during an argument. Detectives couldn't ignore the idea that he might have held a grudge, and Lisa, being alone and vulnerable, may have become the target. With limited forensic evidence due to the condition of the body, investigators turned to Lisa's phone.
A review of her phone calls indicated she had completed phone calls late on June 15th, but from June 16th on, there were no more outgoing calls. Just phone calls and contacts coming in from concerned friends. And so we'd had an operating theory that the crime had occurred either late June 15th or the early morning hours of June 16th.
Her last outgoing calls were made late on June 15th. After that, only incoming calls showed up, concerned friends trying to reach her. It narrowed the timeline of her death. They also learned Lisa had kept expensive jewelry openly in her home, possibly over $20,000 worth, making robbery a potential motive.
Lisa started dating Dwayne. Wendy got all upset and she said she was using him, that she was a gold digger and all this stuff. And so they got into it really big.
Adding to the mystery, detectives discovered she had been in a relationship with Dwayne Heimer, Wendy's stepfather, causing major tension with the Lively family. The once close bond had turned into conflict, and now detectives wondered if that fallout played a deadly role. A surprising new lead sent detectives in a completely unexpected direction, one that pointed right back to the same family they'd been watching. A local tow truck driver stepped forward with an unusual tip. He claimed he had overheard a phone conversation just days before Lisa's murder, though at the time he hadn't thought much of it. Only after seeing news coverage of the case did he realize how significant the conversation might have been.
You said you had some information in regards to what happened in Jamen? Okay, so just start from the beginning.
Yesterday, they were in another one, and I heard he did it. Down from there.
Who said this?
Wendy played me.
Wendy was on the phone.
Yeah.
Okay, and she said the words.
The detectives were intrigued. If what the driver heard was true, it could mean that Wendy had let something slip, something that sounded dangerously close to a confession. That revelation brought a new sense of urgency to the investigation. At the time, detectives had already spoken to Mario, the boyfriend of Wendy's daughter Adonna. Now their attention turned to Wendy and her husband Alan. Detectives decided not to mention the tow truck driver's tip, instead allowing Wendy and Alan to speak freely. Wendy explained that she hadn't spoken to Lisa in over 2 years and had no involvement in what happened.
I don't know what happened in that house. I haven't had anything to do with her in 2 years. I haven't talked to her, called her. You know, I haven't set foot on her property. I know my kids cut through her driveway to walk down the road and stuff. A lot of people do. So like
It's a
I
beautiful
said,
house because it's you and Alan.
it's me and Alan, Adana and Mario, and sometimes Jamie.
Jamie and
he goes by Jay.
Oh,
No.
is he the youngest?
No, Adana's the youngest.
Oh, Adana.
Yeah.
She talked about raising her stepchildren, Jamen and Adana, who had endured trauma before coming into their care. Wendy also described how she and Alan had taken in Dwayne when he was sick with cancer, caring for him until his condition improved.
So Dwayne, as he progressively got worse, we moved him in with us, and we started doing physical therapy and all that stuff at our house. We got him to the point where he was doing better.
But things changed when Lisa began interfering, and Wendy made it clear that their relationship had soured. Alan's interview revealed something deeper. He believed they had been written into Dwayne's will, only to find out later they weren't left anything. Alan blamed Lisa, saying she had manipulated Dwayne toward the end of his life.
We moved him back in his house, and then
he passed in March of the following year?
April.
April, okay.
I mean, specify no, because no one told me. Dwayne had changed his will right at the end of his life. No one told me. And I didn't find out for a week.
While these conversations revealed bitterness and potential motives, they still lacked hard evidence.
Who do you meet? Just meet.
Right.
And within a month, you're talking will and all this. Well, I watched Lisa operate with older people. She befriends them at the end of their life. Creates a rift between them and their friends, or them and their family. And then next thing you know, she's working her way in. So, I mean, I saw her do it a number of times. So I warned him about her.
Fingerprints didn't match, and the hammer found at the scene wasn't the murder weapon. The case remained open and unsolved. As the investigation stalled, detectives realized they needed someone who could shed light on the inner workings of the Lively household. They turned to Jamen, Alan, and Wendy's adopted son, who appeared cooperative and kind. But beneath his calm demeanor, he revealed a household under pressure.
How old were you when you were adopted by the Livelies?
I believe I was 7 turning 8.
7 going 8. Yeah, we're trying to talk to anybody and everyone we can, trying to figure out stuff about Lisa, your neighbor. So
all I know is that he got with my grandpa, and then he moved out.
Okay.
According to Jamen, Alan and Wendy were in the middle of a divorce, sleeping in separate rooms and facing financial struggles. This tension raised serious concerns for the investigators. Jamen also spoke about Adana's boyfriend Mario and described a recent argument over missing money. Although Adana simply questioned him, Mario's defensive reaction stood out. He grew agitated and emotional, deepening suspicion around his behavior.
Why are you accusing me? I didn't touch it. I didn't take anything, you know?
Like really defensive.
Yeah, and so Adana's like, you know, I don't feel like you're telling the truth. I want you to leave. I want you to leave the house because they were already having problems. And he was like, you're dead, you don't know who and like all that, you know, and like.
To your sister?
Yeah, he's like, your family, you don't know who. Like, that's what he was saying.
With Mario's criminal past and gang affiliations in another state, detectives began to consider him a more viable suspect than the Livelies, who, while bitter toward Lisa, didn't seem capable of a brutal crime. Detectives brought Mario in again, but found no solid admissions.
The Livelies, you've been there just a couple months.
Yeah.
They've treated you like a son, I'm assuming, right?
Pretty much. I feel good about myself.
Yeah.
Would you hurt somebody for the Livelies?
No. No. Nobody. I wouldn't do that.
But they're your family.
Well, I consider them my family now, but I wouldn't do nothing like this for anybody.
Still, believing they were close to a breakthrough, they searched the Lively property and collected every pair of shoes, hoping to match the footprint found at Lisa's home. Nothing matched. Just as it seemed like another dead end, a new and unexpected lead emerged, one that would change everything. On July 15, 2017, nearly 2 weeks after Lisa Anstuki's severely decomposed body had been discovered, detectives received a tip that would send the entire case spiraling in an unexpected direction. The call came from a young woman named Lauren Peaton. She claimed she knew who had killed Lisa.
That he murdered his neighbor yesterday. I never saw this coming.
I will admit to you 100% that you had me fooled the first time you came in here.
What she shared next was shocking, not only because of the revelation itself, but because it implicated someone the detectives had never suspected. Alan and Wendy Lively's 20-year-old adopted son, Jamen Hernandez. Lauren was someone Jamen had confided in. She wasn't a random tipster, but a friend, someone he trusted enough to share what he thought would remain a secret. According to her, Jamen had confessed to killing their neighbor.
He told me if he was found out that he would go on a rampage. And he's like, I'm gonna tell you this, and you can't say anything. He told me that he murdered his neighbor yesterday, and I didn't know what to say. I was like, why would you do that?
He had told her it was something he did out of anger and frustration, believing Lisa had somehow caused harm to his family, financial or otherwise. He'd framed it as an act of twisted retribution.
He told me he did because apparently she screwed his family over, put his family in debt. And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. Like, what do you say to that? He told me that since I now knew that if I were to breathe a word about it, he would take out someone I cared about. He was like, honestly, if I'm going down, I might just take out more people with me.
But what deeply unsettled Lauren wasn't just the confession itself, it was the way he said it. His words were dark, threatening, and full of resentment. He had warned her not to say anything, making it clear that if she did, he wouldn't hesitate to hurt someone close to her. It was a chilling threat, one that made her hesitate for days before finally coming forward.
He was like a good person. I never saw this coming from him.
He does seem like a very nice kid. But here's the thing I can tell you, is that we never know people exactly for who they are, okay?
Detectives immediately took Lauren's statement seriously. She was visibly shaken, clearly disturbed by the weight of what she now carried. Her fear was genuine, and the emotional conflict was obvious. She had known Jamen for years and saw him as kind, quiet, and gentle. Now she was struggling to reconcile the person she thought he was with the one she believed had committed a brutal murder. However, her testimony alone wasn't enough. The detectives still lacked hard evidence, something physical, something undeniable, that could tie Jamen directly to Lisa's murder. Without that, they had no grounds for an arrest. It was a frustrating position. They were closer than ever to solving the case, but still couldn't act with full authority. Determined to push the investigation forward, the team developed a strategy. They would attempt to get Jamen to incriminate himself, perhaps not with a full confession, but even an implication or a slip-up could be enough to move the case along. The plan involved Lauren again. The detectives asked her to reach out to Jamen in a casual way, hoping a natural conversation might lead him to reveal more. The next evening, they listened in as she contacted him. But the attempt fell flat. Jamen was careful, guarded. His responses were vague, evasive, and deliberately ambiguous. He didn't mention Lisa's name. He didn't reference the confession. If anything, he seemed more aware, almost as if he suspected he was being watched. This raised alarms among the detectives. Instead of moving closer to a confession, they worried they may have tipped him off.
Hey, Jen.
What up?
You brought up something the other day, and it kind of worried me because I'm seeing things everywhere.
Okay, so
Like I'm seeing
that's
stuff.
the question then.
I'm seeing stuff all over Facebook. I'm seeing stuff like I'm hearing stuff on the radio. Jay, do you have like a second? Could you go?
It doesn't even matter.
Could you just for a second?
Stop talking about it. Stop thinking about it. Let it go. Drop it.
The next morning, Realizing they couldn't afford to wait any longer, detectives made plans to bring Jamen in for questioning. But when they arrived at the Lively residence, they discovered he had already left. Alan, Wendy, and Jamen had departed earlier in the day, driving off before authorities could reach them. It wasn't clear whether they were running or simply unaware of the impending investigation, but the timing was suspicious. Luckily, events unfolded quickly. Later that same day, a routine patrol stop changed everything. A deputy pulled over a vehicle that matched the Lively's car. Inside were Alan, Wendy, and Jamen. It was a sudden break, one the detectives hadn't expected but desperately needed. The pieces were finally falling into place, and the truth behind Lisa Anstuki's murder was about to be fully uncovered.
We found that Jamen had next to him in the back seat a backpack that was full of things that you would need if you were leaving town quickly. A go bag, if you will, and a small personal safe that contained jewelry that belonged to Lisa Anstuki.
As the investigation into Lisa Anstuki's tragic murder dragged on, detectives were working tirelessly to identify and apprehend the person responsible. But things took an unexpected turn when officers conducted a routine traffic stop that would ultimately change everything. Inside the car were Alan Lively, Wendy Lively, and their 20-year-old adopted son, Jamen Hernandez. At first glance, nothing seemed especially suspicious, but when officers searched the vehicle, what they found immediately raised red flags. In the back seat next to Jamen was a backpack. Inside was everything you'd expect from someone preparing to flee: extra clothes, money, toiletries, and a few essential items. It was, in essence, a go-bag. But that wasn't the only disturbing discovery. Also in Jamen's possession was a small, personal safe. When investigators opened it, they found jewelry that had once belonged to Lisa Anstuki. That was the break detectives had been waiting for. It wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was proof that Jamen was connected to Lisa beyond just living next door. All three occupants of the car were immediately taken into custody and brought to the police station. The time had finally come to confront Jamen. Detectives sat across from him, determined to get answers. In earlier conversations, Jamen had been calm, composed, even helpful.
Take a look at that.
Yeah,
Take a look at that. You know what that smelled like? Do you have any idea what that was like?
I didn't do that.
Look at it. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Look at it.
But now the evidence was undeniable. He couldn't brush it off anymore. Still, he remained defiant, insisting over and over again that he hadn't done anything wrong. But this time, detectives didn't hold back. They laid out everything they knew: the safe, the jewelry, the backpack. They didn't need Jamen to admit anything. They had enough to charge him. But a confession would close the case. It would give Lisa's family a measure of peace. After hours of intense questioning, the pressure finally broke him. Jamen admitted it. He confessed.
Sorry, okay?
No. You need to let it out, man. This has been living in your head. This is hard.
You don't even know what's in my head. It was gonna be fine if she didn't step in. Mom and Dad would be fine and everyone.
He said the hatred had been building inside him for months, nearly a year. It wasn't just a sudden act of violence. It was something he had thought about, dwelled on, and planned. He believed Lisa was responsible for tearing his family apart. In his mind, she had ruined everything. That resentment had festered over time, and eventually it turned into something dark and dangerous. On the early morning of June 16th, 2017, Jamen made his move. He waited until it was still and quiet, then crept over to Lisa's house, carrying a baseball bat. He approached the back of the house and kicked in the door. The loud noise startled Lisa awake. She got up from her bed, disoriented, not knowing what was going on. That's when Jamen struck. He swung the bat and hit her. She fell to the floor, injured, but still alive. Jarman later admitted that he was surprised by how easy it was. In that moment, he felt in control. He began moving through her house, rummaging through drawers and cabinets, looking for valuables, specifically jewelry he could take and sell. But the horror wasn't over. While searching, Jamen heard Lisa moaning. She was trying to get up. She was still alive. Instead of helping her, instead of walking away, Jamen picked up the bat again, and this time he kept hitting her until she stopped moving completely. After the murder, Jamen didn't panic. He didn't call anyone or try to hide right away. He continued searching the house and collected whatever he thought was valuable. Then he walked out, went home, and began destroying the evidence. He built a bonfire and burned everything he had worn that night, his shoes, his gloves, his clothes, anything that might connect him to the crime. He even disposed of the baseball bat, driving nearly 25 miles to a pond where he dumped it. By the time Lisa's body was discovered 2 weeks later, the physical trail was nearly gone. But his confession painted a complete picture of what had happened. When detectives informed Alan and Wendy of Jamen's confession, they were devastated. They had no idea he had been harboring so much anger. They insisted they were unaware of his plans and had nothing to do with Lisa's murder. According to them, they never noticed any warning signs. There had also been a tip earlier in the investigation involving Wendy. A tow truck driver had claimed she made a suspicious phone call around the time Lisa disappeared, something that didn't sit right with him. But after looking into it, detectives couldn't find any proof to support that allegation. Jamen never mentioned his adoptive parents being involved in any way. With no evidence connecting them to the crime, the authorities cleared both Alan and Wendy of wrongdoing. Mario Eos, a local handyman who had worked for Lisa, had become a person of interest early in the case. Some suspected he may have been involved due to his proximity to Lisa's life and some vague hearsay. But once Jamen confessed and laid out the full timeline, Mario was officially ruled out as a suspect. He had nothing to do with it. With the case now resolved, the focus turned to justice. In April of 2018, Jamen Hernandez pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. The plea deal removed the death penalty from consideration. His defense team argued that his difficult upbringing, marked by years of abuse, abandonment, and neglect, should be taken into account when determining his punishment. But the judge didn't see it that way. Yes, Jamen had experienced hardship. Yes, his past was full of trauma. But none of that, the court said, could justify the decision to brutally murder another human being in cold blood. In sentencing, the judge told him that no punishment could bring Lisa back or undo what had been done. Jamen was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. He is currently serving his sentence at the Idaho State Correctional Center in Kuna, located in Ada County. According to prison records, he will be eligible for parole in the year 2042. As the story closed, there was a lingering question that haunted many who had followed the case. What if no one had come forward? What if the key witness who provided the tip about Jamen had stayed silent? For days, she had wrestled with the decision. Turning Jamen in meant losing someone she had once trusted, someone she cared about.
Turning him in, knowing that I would probably never see him again, it was the hardest choice I think I ever had to make. Like, it hurt worse than any breakup I ever experienced. It hurt worse than anything bad I ever really had happen to me. This was the worst thing.
But in the end, she knew it was the right thing to do. And because of that decision, Lisa's killer was brought to justice. Jamen had convinced himself that Lisa was the reason his adoptive parents were suffering. He believed she had stolen from them, manipulated Dwayne, and destroyed their family's chance at a future. In his mind, eliminating her was the only way to make things right. Lisa never received a single cent from Dwayne's estate, not $1. Everything went to Dwayne's biological son, Richard, who lived in Texas. Lisa didn't keep the house. She didn't inherit any savings. The only thing she retained after Dwayne's passing was a bed they had bought together during happier times. All of Jamon's rage, all of his misplaced anger, and his act of violence was based on a lie. He had murdered an innocent woman for something she didn't even have. Lisa's loved ones were left to grieve a loss that made no sense. A sweet, kind woman was taken from the world far too soon, and the people who knew her best were left with a hole that could never be filled. Her memory, however, lives on in those who loved her. To this day, they still think about her, they still miss her, and they still wish they could talk to her one more time. For those closest to Lisa, the grief never really goes away.
Oh my gosh. I miss her so much.
Before we conclude, we want to extend our heartfelt condolences to Lisa's family and everyone whose life she touched. What do you think about this tragic case? Do you believe Jamen acted entirely alone, or is there more to this story than we know? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.